So here are 8 application mistakes I want you to avoid when applying to physical therapy. Just 8. I'm sure there might be a little more, a little less, but here are the 8 I want you to focus on. So let's get right into it in this video. I'm turning dreams into reality. In the lab with the... What's up guys, my name is Coleman. I'm a physical therapist and the co-founder of Pre-PT Grind. And again, on this video, we're gonna be talking about the 8 application mistakes to avoid when applying to physical therapy school. So get it out, get out your notebook, get out your phone, hurry, rush, pause this video, and let's break it down right now. So we're gonna go through them, then we'll come back around. So number 1 is applying too early. Applying too early. Number 2 is applying too late. Number 3 is going to be rushing, or you can put FOMO on your list. Next is applying to too many programs, or I guess too little programs as well. Then next, prerequisite classes. Mistakes around prerequisite classes. Next, mistakes around GPA calculations. Then the next one, experience mishaps. Then lastly, tuition costs. The big bad money conversation. We'll have a little talk about that as well. So let's head right back on up to the top and talk about number 1. So applying too early. Now what I mean by applying too early is usually for the people who are trying to get a head start on their application, and they're applying in 6 months, a year from now, maybe 2 years from now, and they might be on different pre-PT videos or forums or in one of our groups and so on and so forth, and they're seeing other people freak out about their application right now, and they're like, oh my gosh, they're doing this, they're doing that, they have all these questions. Should I be getting a head start so I don't end up like them? I love the effort, I love the forward thinking, but at the same time, here are some traps that you don't want to fall into. Applying too early to the point where you get your application kind of done, then you apply when it's your time to actually apply. Then you try to bring your stuff forward, carry your information forward on the application, which is called PTCAS. And if you bring that stuff forward, some stuff may not go forward, some stuff might get stuck in the middle. You're like, oh my gosh, at this time I didn't have this experience yet, so now I have to update it. You might have a little bit more time than you think, and you might have a little more time than you want if you start applying too early. Now, if you start keeping track of what you're doing on your own spreadsheets, or you have a paper folder, that's great. I'm all for it. You can even start it on your PTCAS application as well. It's just when you start to see other people start to freak out during their application cycle, you start to freak out too when it's not even your problem yet. And you start trying to apply too early when you don't even have to really, when you don't even have to start freaking out about it yet. So if you want to get stuff in order right now, if you want to start keeping track of things, if everything that you're seeing kind of puts a light under your butt to start going in the right direction, then that's great. But at the same time, don't start stuff too early, then it's just gonna create a mishap. So that's the first part. Don't apply too early. Number 2, the total opposite problem, applying too late. So if you're a type A student, number 1 was for you. If you're a procrastination type of student, this point is for you, applying too late. So if you see that the application cycle opens up June 15th or July 1st, somewhere in there, you're like, I got time. July 1st, it's only June whatever right now. It's only July 1st right now. I got plenty of time till my deadline comes. Then before you know it, your deadline is only 2 weeks away. Then you're saying, oh man, my deadline is only 2 weeks away, and so on and so forth. And before you know it, it's 3 days before that 11:59 Eastern time deadline, and you're like, oh my gosh, then you're running into a whole nother problem. So with applying too late, let's give yourself a little buffer. Let's make sure that you give yourself a deadline about 4 to 5 weeks in advance of the actual school's deadline, just to keep you moving, just to keep you on your toes, because you don't know what's going to come up. You don't know if a family emergency is going to come up, you're going to get sick, something's going to happen with the PTCAS application, and what you thought would get done in the next 2 weeks, well, that week or 2 is now gone because of whatever happened. So the main point with applying too late, how we're going to fix that is give yourself a deadline. So if your deadline is for one of your schools October 1st, let's give yourself a deadline of September 15th. Same thing with wherever your deadline is, so that if you come across any obstacles or anything you have to fix, or transcripts are getting delayed, or you have to travel for something, you're still okay and you're not affected as much as you thought you would be. Okay, so that's number 2, applying too late. All right, number 3 is rushing. Number 3 is rushing. So I don't care if you're a type A person that we talked about in number 1, or a procrastination person that we talked about in number 2. Either way, don't rush. Don't rush. I know you're going to see other people freaking out. You're going to see other comments on other videos. You're going to see forums and people talking about this and that. What can you get done? Don't buy into the FOMO. Don't rush out. Don't have that fear of missing out, because you're not missing out on anything. Take your time. Quality over quantity. You're not going to get a trophy. You're not going to get a cookie for hitting submit first. Nobody's going to come out and say, hey, out of 12,000, 20,000 people, you hit submit first. Congratulations. Here's a cookie. Here's your trophy. Here's $20. Nobody's going to care except you. You're going to go on some forum, or you're going to see other people saying, oh, I submitted way back in July. I submitted. So it does not matter. Don't buy into that fear of missing out. Don't rush. Quality over trying to just get your application in, just trying to get it done. Because what's going to happen is you're going to hit submit, then you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I messed up on this, or I didn't get that done. Or you're going to hit submit and be like, oh shoot, man, I had more time than I thought. Maybe I should have looked this over. Maybe I should have looked that over. Maybe I want to add another school, and so on and so forth. And yes, you can add stuff later. I'll make another video about that. But the main point is to minimize mistakes as much as possible. Because some things that I'll talk about in another video cannot be changed in your application once you hit submit. And if you're just trying to race other people that you don't even know online, or maybe even your pre-PT friends, it will not be worth it. It will not be worth it. Yes, you do want to minimize procrastination, but at the same time, you don't want to rush and make mistakes and end up, having a bad application or something you could have fixed to, make your acceptance more apt to being, taken in or being accepted, as if you just rushed, or you get what I'm saying. So don't rush. That is number 3. Number 4, we're going to be talking about applying to too many schools or too little schools. All right, so applying to a certain number of schools. Avoid this mistake. Applying to 20 plus schools, or maybe applying to just one school. Like, either one of those extremes could be a mistake on your end. So let's talk about the first, applying to too many schools. With that, the problem comes in with time and stress. Okay, I want you to keep those 2 things in mind with this point, time and stress. Okay, and I might even throw in a third point in there in a second. So with the time, applying to too many schools, you have to keep in mind that all these schools could have different deadlines. They could be, one school can have an August 15th deadline, the other school could have like a March 15th deadline. So how much time do you have to apply to all those schools like they're the only school that matters, and get everything in for each one of those schools in on time? Now, number 2 kind of coincides with that, is the stress that comes along with it. If you can handle applying to 20 plus schools, like they're the only, like each one of those schools are the only school in the world, then you might be able to handle it. You might be able to handle it. If that doesn't stress you out thinking about you having a spreadsheet of 20 plus schools and every requirement they want versus what another school doesn't, versus what prerequisite classes one school wants versus 3 schools want the GRE but the other 17 don't, and you have to get these supplemental essays done for these 15 schools but the other 5 don't want it. If that doesn't stress you out, hey, you can go ahead and apply to as many schools as you want. PTCast will take your money and take your application. They could care less how many schools you apply to. Either way, they're getting paid. So keep that in mind. Then I kind of alluded to the third point I'll add in there is the payment of it. So PTCast costs money to apply to PT school. At the time of this video, it's about, I think, $150 to $155 for the first application, then about $60 for each additional application after that. So you can do the math, and if you want to apply to 20, 25 plus schools, that will be a fee that you'll have to take on. So keep those 3 things in mind. Keep those 3 things in mind. It's the time, the stress that you might be under, then also how the money comes in to those factors. Now, if you're on the other end of the spectrum and you only want to apply to one school, that could work, but you have to know that school inside and out. And of course, the con of that is if you don't get into that school, then hey, you can always add a school later, but you could also just be in a predicament where you have to apply next cycle as well. So just keep that in mind with applying to too many or too little schools. Now, the frame that we have right now for where a lot of students kind of like to apply in reference to how many schools to apply to is about 4 schools to 7 schools. From what we've seen, that's been what a lot of students been able to handle financially and handle time-wise and handle stress-wise as well. So if you find yourself in kind of that range of 4 to 7, 3 to 8, you can buffer it a little bit with that range, then you're in a good spot. Just try to stay away from those extremes, and you'll have a much more stress-free application. All right, so that is that next point. The next one, prerequisite classes. Prerequisite classes, a mistake to avoid with those. We can go on and on about some mistakes to avoid with prerequisite classes, but what I want you to keep in mind is this. What classes do the schools you want require, and what classes can also be replaced or substituted for the classes that the schools require. So let's just take anatomy and physiology. You went to a community college and you took AMP1 and AMP2, but you didn't do so good in AMP2, then you took, I don't know, a zoology course or something like that, or you took physiology at another school. Do those classes substitute for AMP2 or AMP1? I want you to keep those things in mind, because what happens most of the time is that students may assume that one class will substitute for another, or this might be a prereq and another class might not be a prereq. And either one of those could cause havoc. So if you assume that a class is a substitute and you apply to the school, and they take only that anatomy 2 class, but they don't take the zoology, you'll be like, man, yeah, I got these zoology classes in there, and that will replace this AMP2 grade. So I got a C in that AMP2, but I got an A in that zoology, so hey, that'll even out. So I'm good, right? I have this high GPA, and my GPA is a 3.5 from what I calculated. But in reality, they don't care about that zoology class, and what they're calculating is that C or that F with that AMP2 grade that you got. And you'll be like, oh man, I didn't know that. I didn't know they didn't substitute. I didn't know that this class wouldn't count. So you have to keep that in mind. And what you can easily do to find this is just go to the school's PTCAS profile. So go to ptcas.org, find your school, then go to the classes or prerequisite section, and you'll see somewhere close by that they will have substitute type of classes, or classes that can be used in place of other ones. So keep that in mind. That's the biggest thing that I want you to keep in mind right now for prerequisite classes. Now, I know people have a bunch of nuanced situations, so feel free to comment below or send us a DM and we can help you out with your situation as well. So that's the biggest thing I want you to keep in mind with prereq classes. Number, whatever number this is, it'll be on the screen. GPA calculations for this next point. So this goes really well with the prerequisite point we just talked about. So with GPA calculations, this can, you can do this, or you can keep this point in mind with the prereqs. So if we take that zoology AMP2 kind of scenario, that is a perfect way that GPA calculations or GPA calculations mistakes could happen. If there's an F in that AMP2 class, then the zoology class is an A, but you didn't know those didn't substitute, your calculations could be, way off from a 3.0 to a 3.5 and so on and so forth. But really, the biggest thing I want you to keep in mind with these calculations is this. How do the schools you're applying to, how do they specifically calculate their prereq GPAs? Or even cumulative GPAs, but I want to focus more on prerequisite GPAs. How do the schools that you're applying to, that you want to go to so bad, that you supposedly did your research on, how do they calculate GPAs? Do they take a culmination and an overall average of every single class that you've taken? Do they take the highest retake of all the classes you've taken, of all the prereqs you've taken? Do they take whatever GPA is on PTCAS? If PTCAS spits out a number and says, Here's that student's overall cumulative GPA. Do your schools that you're applying to say, oh, well, I guess that's your GPA. Same thing with the science, the math, so on and so forth. I want you guys to go to the PTCast profiles of the schools or the website and find how they calculate GPAs. Go to the GPA section and be very careful and be very meticulous on how they calculate GPAs. If you don't get the answer you want, go up and find the admissions coordinator or whatever and shoot them an email. You're not bugging them, you're not bothering them. These are the questions they are there to answer. So keep that in mind. How do they specifically calculate GPAs? They take the highest grade? Do they take the last 60 credit hours? Do they average them all together? Do they take exactly what PTCast gives them? And there you will specifically find how you rank for each of your schools. Maybe for one school, you have a 3.2 GPA, but for another school, the way they calculate GPAs, you got a 3.65. In another school, the way they calculate it, you got a 3.47. But for the other two schools, you have a 3.82, whatever that is. You can be very strategic around what schools to apply to and how you're viewed by the schools to have a better chance of being accepted. That's how you can go about this in a strategic way. But if you don't go about this way, this can be a huge mistake, and you can have two different perspectives on how your application is, and that's how assumptions come into play. And this is how like expectations get destroyed, and this is how your heart sinks when you're like, oh my gosh, why didn't I get accepted to that school, and how did they just reject me? I just applied yesterday, but the computer system shot me an email like, sorry. Well, this is how it can be avoided with applying to certain schools versus others. So keep that in mind. I know we might have more questions about that, so drop a comment below and we'll help you out as well. Now, last two. Next one on the list is experience mishaps. Experience mishaps. So this is really about going through all these points and getting very stuck on just stopping at your GPA or GRE calculations and how you look on paper, and not explaining and expanding enough on how you are outside of just those numbers, about what experiences you have done. So what I mean by this specifically is this. With your experiences section, with the notes you're taking on this video, I want you to put down a few things. For experiences, I want you to explain it like this: your time, your leadership, and your results. I want you to talk about those three things in your experiences, in your bullet points, in your essays, when you talk about your experiences, when you just talk in person. I don't care what it is. Keep those three things in mind to make your experiences stand out how you want them to. Because you can talk about your observation hours experience and put them to sleep. You can say, oh yeah, I cleaned tables and I answered phones and I helped the patients get out the car and I pushed that wheelchair. Nobody can push a wheelchair like me. But they've seen that explanation too many times. So what I mean by this is, if you have observation hour experiences, or you're a PT tech, or you're a musician, I don't care what it is. One, your time. How long have you been there? Short, long, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, I don't care how long it is. How long have you been there? Okay? Next is the leadership. Do you have any leadership positions in that field, or in that setting, or in that experience? If you do not, who have you learned under? Who was the leader, or who was the manager or director in charge? Who did you learn from, and what did you learn from, or who did you learn from in that experience? Okay, so that's under leadership. Then lastly is the results. What happened? Tell us about what happened. If you did a food drive, or you volunteered at a marathon, how many people ran past? How many gallons of water did you give out? How many homeless people did you feed? How many patients did you see a day? How many phone calls did you take? How many students came to camp? So on and so forth. How many injuries did you help prevent? The list goes on and on. What happened? What were the results? So stay away and avoid experience mishaps with just talking about your experience from your point of view about what you think they would care about. But in reality, they just don't care about it, or you didn't explain it enough to make them care. So keep those three things in mind to extract some good substance from your experience to help you stand out how you want to stand out. Okay? Then lastly is the money subject, tuition. Tuition, the cost of physical therapy school. When you're applying to physical therapy school, a big mishap could be you not paying attention to cost. Now, I've done other videos on PT school costs and low PT schools. We have a whole list on it. Talk about, is PT dead or not? Why you should not go to PT school. So we've had a healthy conversation about constructive criticism on PT schools and the price and the cost and all that. But a big application mistake could be not paying attention to how much the schools cost and you just saying, I just want to get in anywhere. Somebody accept me and I'll worry about the money stuff later. Well, in that case, that's where you might end up being like some other physical therapists who you might have observed and they're not happy with their job. We don't want you to be like that. We don't want you to go through all this pre-PT stuff and PT school just to get out and be very dissatisfied or be very angry with your financial situation because of the career you chose and the cost of the school you went to. That can be avoided as much as possible or planned for as much as possible if you keep this in mind. That could be a huge mistake that can have ripples on the rest of your life. So definitely check out the other videos we have on that subject. And we can dive deeper into that there. But those were the 8 mistakes I want you to avoid. The 8 most common, in my opinion, mistakes that pre-PTs kind of run into in their application and the mistakes I want you to avoid. All right, so like, subscribe, share, comment, all that good stuff on this video, and we will see you on the next one.